When we think of the roots of classical sacred music, where does your mind go?
Maybe you think of Gregorian chants in Rome, or the great cathedrals of Europe.
We're taught that the West invented the way we write music, that notation was a European discovery.
But what if I told you that was wrong?
What if I told you that 600 years before the first European musical notation was standardized, a man in the highlands of Africa was already writing the music of heaven, a man who didn't just compose songs, but claimed to have downloaded the sounds of the angels themselves.
His legacy is one of the oldest, continuously practiced musical traditions on earth.
It is haunting, it is complex, and for 1,500 years, it hasn't changed.
Today, we aren't just talking about history.
We are talking about Saint Yared.
And if you think you know the story of Christian music, you need to hear this.
To understand this story, we have to go back.
Way back.
We are traveling to the 6th century, to the ancient Kingdom of Aksum.
This was a superpower of the ancient world, but inside the church, things were quieter.
Before this time, the liturgy, the church service, was mostly spoken.
It was murmured.
There was no unified system of song.
There was no rhythm that bound the people together. Enter Yared.
Now, usually, when we hear about saints or geniuses, we expect a story about a child prodigy. You know the type, the kid who plays violin at age 3.
But Yared was the opposite.
In fact, his story begins with total, crushing failure. Yared was born around 505 AD.
His father passed away when he was young, so his mother sent him to be raised
and educated by his uncle, a learned priest named Gidwan. The expectation was high.
Yared was supposed to memorize the Psalms of David. In the Orthodox tradition, this is the baseline.
You memorize the text.
But Yared just couldn't do it. He struggled.
He fell behind. Other students mocked him.
His uncle, frustrated by Yared's lack of progress, was reportedly harsh with him. It got so bad that Yared felt he had no future. He was convinced he was simply not smart enough. So, he did what many of us would want to do in that situation.
He quit. He ran away.
He fled into the countryside, exhausted and depressed.
He sat under a tree, ready to give up on his education and his life in the church.
And this is where the legend gives us one of the most famous metaphors in Ethiopian history. Yared is sitting there, watching a little worm. This worm is trying to climb up the rough bark of the tree to reach the fruit at the top. Yared watches.
The worm climbs, slips, and falls. It climbs again,
falls again. 3 times,
4 times, 5 times, 6 times.
Yared is captivated. He thinks this creature is weak. It's tiny. It should just give up, like me. But the worm tries a 7th time, and this time, it sticks.
It crawls over the hurdle and reaches the top.
It was a light bulb moment. Yared realized that talent isn't just about natural ability. It's about resilience.
He went back to his uncle, apologized, and asked for one more chance. And whatever mental block he had,
it was gone. He didn't just catch up, he surpassed everyone.
But his true calling wasn't just reading books. It was something much louder.
Fast forward a few years. Yared is now a respected scholar.
But one day, while standing outside the church, something supernatural happens.
Tradition tells us that 3 birds descended from the heavens.
But these weren't normal birds.
They spoke to him. They led him away from the city to a secluded place. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, this is viewed as a direct mystical encounter.
It is said that Yared was taken up mentally or spiritually to the gates of heaven. There, he heard the angels praising God.
But they weren't just singing melodies.
They were using instruments, drums, horns, sistrums.
And they were singing in a language of musical modes that didn't exist on earth. Yared absorbed this.
He heard the music of the seraphim and the cherubim. When he returned to consciousness, he didn't just have a song stuck in his head. He had an entire musical theory downloaded into his brain.
This is where the musicology gets fascinating. Yared organized these heavenly sounds into 3 distinct modes or categories. In the West, we might think of major or minor keys. Yared called them gears. The first mode, serious, heavy, and solemn, used for ordinary days.
There's a heavy, sorrowful, and tender,
used during Lent and funerals. Area joyful, light, and complex, used for great festivals. He linked these modes to the Holy Trinity. He linked them to the seasons.
He created a system where the music changes based on the time of day, the season of the year, and the specific holiday.
He composed hymns for every single day of the year.
We are talking about thousands of hymns. This was a monumental intellectual achievement.
Now, here is the part that should blow your mind.
If you compose thousands of songs, how do you remember them?
In 6th century Africa, There were no tape recorders. There was no Western sheet music.
So, Yared invented his own.
Look at this. These small signs above the text, they aren't accent marks. They are musical notes. He used the Ge'ez alphabet, but he modified the letters to represent melody, rhythm, and articulation. This system is called Seraye. Some signs mean raise your voice. Some mean slide down. Some mean wave your voice like a vibrating string. While Europe was still centuries away from developing the staff notation we use today, Yared had already codified a complex musical language. He didn't just write the lyrics, he froze the sound of the 6th century in ink. Because of this system, the chant you hear in an Ethiopian church today is virtually identical to what was sung 1,500 years ago.
It is a sonic time capsule.
Of course, when you create something this powerful, you get noticed. The emperor at the time was Gaba Meskel.
He loved Yared's music. He felt it brought the Kingdom of Aksum closer to God. There is a famous story that illustrates just how hypnotic this music was.
One day, Yared was performing for the emperor.
Yared was standing, chanting, lost in the spiritual zone.
The emperor was sitting, listening, equally entranced. In his hand, the emperor held a sharp spear, a symbol of his office.
He was so captivated by the music that he accidentally dropped the spear
right onto Yared's foot.
The spear pierced Yared's foot. But here is the crazy part. Yared didn't stop singing.
He didn't even flinch.
He was in such a state of spiritual ecstasy, a flow state so deep that he didn't feel the pain until the song was over.
When the music stopped, the emperor looked down, saw the blood, and was horrified.
He begged for forgiveness. As an apology, he offered to grant Yared any wish. Yared didn't ask for money.
He didn't ask for power. He asked to be allowed to retire to the mountains, to live in prayer and teach his students.
He wanted to dedicate the rest of his life to perfecting this art.
So, why does this matter to us today?
If you walk into an Ethiopian Orthodox Church this Sunday, you won't see people sitting passively in pews checking their watches.
You will see a marlet. You will hear the kebro, that massive drum that represents the heartbeat of Christ. You will see the mikwamia, the prayer staff. It's used for support during long vigils, but it's also a percussion instrument, waved in rhythm. You will hear the sistrum, a metal rattle that dates back to the Old Testament. This isn't just singing.
It is a full body workout.
It is polyrhythmic. Western music usually relies on a strict 4/4 time signature. But Yared's music,
it layers rhythms.
The drum does one thing, the hand clapping does another, the voice does a third.
It creates a trance-like state meant to detach you from the earth.
To become a master of this music, adeptus students still study for years, sometimes decades.
They memorize the entire book of Yared's chants.
It is an oral and written university that has survived wars, invasions, and modernism.
Saint Yared died in the mountains, but in a way, he never left.
He gave Ethiopia and the world a voice.
He taught us that music isn't just entertainment.
It's a
ladder that starts with a worm struggling up a tree and ends with the choirs of angels. So, the next time you hear about the history of music, remember the name Yared.
Remember that long before the symphonies of Europe, the highlands of Africa were already singing the music of heaven. Thank you for watching.
If you found this story fascinating, please hit that like button, it helps the channel immensely. And tell me in the comments, have you ever heard Ethiopian chanting in person?
What did it feel like to you? I'll see you in the next video.